Witness the power that changes our world. Welcome to the El Niño season.
Welcome to your dose of wowness. Imagine standing on the parched earth of the Deccan Plateau in south-central India. It's June 1876. You are a farmer. You've been reading the sky for signs of the southwest monsoon, watching for the rains that'll sustain your crops. But the monsoon never arrives.
You feel the visceral dread as July passes without a single cloud building over the Western Ghats. The humidity is just gone. The wells run low, and then they run dry. The millet and cotton around you stunt and turn yellow. By August, the harvest is entirely lost. By October, you and hundreds of thousands of others are forced to move, walking for days toward British relief camps.
50 million. That's the death toll across 3 continents over the next 3 years. 50 million. It stands as the deadliest climate event in human history.
Part 1. Twin Climate Anomalies.
This 1877 event was preceded by an extended La Niña. That conditioned the Pacific warm pool with anomalous heat. When the cycle finally reversed, the atmospheric engine known as the Walker circulation was disrupted, sending warm water surging eastward with exceptional force. But this wasn't a standard El Niño. It was supercharged by a second climate anomaly in the Indian Ocean. The Indian Ocean dipole is an independent mode where the western Indian Ocean warms relative to the eastern, and this warming independently suppresses rainfall over India and East Africa.
The simultaneous collision of these two anomalies created an inescapable, historic atmospheric trap for the global monsoon system. Co-occurring El Niño and positive Indian Ocean dipole events are consistently the most damaging to Indian rainfall. The 1877 event represents the most extreme historical example of this exact combination. Understanding that interaction is what makes 1877 legible as something far more than just a run of bad luck.
Part 2. The Architecture of Famine.
In April 1876, the Viceroy of India, Lord Lytton, arrived with explicit instructions from London: cut government expenditure. To run famine relief, he appointed Sir Richard Temple, who implemented a strict free market approach. Under the dominant Victorian political economy framework, officials believed government intervention in grain markets would distort prices and create dependency. They interpreted famine as a natural corrective mechanism. The central instrument of this policy was the Temple wage, a daily ration of exactly 1 pound of grain. That's 1,627 calories. This was the compensation for a full day of hard manual labor on public works projects in tropical heat. The ration was set deliberately below the diet provided to inmates of the Madras jail, on the principle that relief shouldn't be made more attractive than normal employment.
Medical professionals protested explicitly. William Cornish, the sanitary commissioner for Madras, documented that the ration was completely insufficient for the labor required. Florence Nightingale wrote, both privately and publicly, that the policy was a catastrophe. The objections were overruled. Weak individuals who couldn't perform hard labor were entirely excluded. People starved to death while actively working inside the British relief camps.
In 1877, India exported between 6.4 and 6.7 million hundredweight of wheat annually to Britain. Now, the full picture involves a complex trade dynamic. The grain being exported was primarily from the Punjab, which wasn't directly affected by the drought. The famine-affected regions produced millet and rice. But the export of grain from a country experiencing mass famine meant that India maintained its position as a net food exporter, simply because the administration prioritized trade balance and debt service over emergency expenditure.
Part 3. One event, 3 continents. This wasn't an isolated regional tragedy. It was a synchronized teleconnection destroying harvests across the world simultaneously.
India, the Deccan famine, 12 to 29 million dead. China, the incredible hunger, 9 to 13 million dead. Brazil, the Grande Seca, 500,000 dead. This was a single planetary event striking populations with zero warning.
The Chinese famine of 1876 to 1879 killed between 9 and 13 million people in the northern provinces. It happened for exactly the same climate reason as the Indian famine, but in a country that wasn't a British colony. It was governed by the Qing dynasty, which actually tried to respond but lacked the capacity to succeed. The traditional ever-normal granaries had been severely depleted by the Taiping Rebellion and massive war indemnities. The system failed, leaving millions to eat bark and mud.
In Brazil, the intertropical convergence zone was displaced southward by the El Niño.
The interior Sertão received almost no rainfall during 2 consecutive wet seasons. 500,000 people died as the crisis triggered a mass migration toward the coastal city of Fortaleza, absolutely overwhelming the city with starving refugees.
Part 4. The Davis Argument. This brings us to Mike Davis's synthesis in his book, Late Victorian Holocausts, and the core historical debate about culpability.
Davis's thesis is direct. The late 19th century famines were expressions of a single global climate event mediated through colonial economic structures. The droughts were natural. The massive death tolls were engineered by systems that dismantled traditional local famine prevention mechanisms, replacing them with market systems that failed catastrophically under stress.
Historical records provide empirical proof of Davis's argument. In British-administered regions, strict free market ideology and the lethal temple wage resulted in massive excess mortality. Meanwhile, in the Mysore princely state, which was permitted to implement independent relief policies outside of the British administration, mortality was substantially lower. Same drought. Vastly different death toll.
Part 5. Echoes in 2026. Today, peer-reviewed seasonal forecasters are explicitly comparing the developing 2026 El Niño to the 1877 event.
The structural parallels in the Pacific Ocean today are precise. We see a multi-year La Niña preconditioning from 2020 to 2023. We see a rapid El Niño warming trajectory in mid-2026. And we have a positive Indian Ocean dipole watch for late 2026. The exact same atmospheric gears are clicking into place.
But there's a critical difference today: modern forecasting and state infrastructure. India, China, and Brazil all have early warning systems, pre-positioned food stocks, and social protection programs. The physical mechanism is unchanged. The same Walker circulation disruption that failed the monsoon in 1876 operates today. But the difference between a climate event and a famine is, and always has been, a policy choice.
Here is what Davis argues 1877 actually tells us. The climate does not distinguish between the powerful and the powerless. El Niño just moves warm water east. What it does know, what it cannot help but reveal, is the shape of the human systems it runs through. As historian Mike Davis concludes, in 1877, it ran through a political economy that valued markets over lives. Which leaves us with a question. If the atmospheric gears of 1877 are clicking into place for 2026, are our modern systems truly prepared to choose a different outcome? Thank you for watching. Tomorrow, day 98, La Niña, the cold twin, the other half of the ENSO cycle, the one that brings the opposite problem to many of the same regions. Floods where 1877 brought drought, cyclones where 1877 brought heat, and its own historical record of catastrophe. Day 98, see you there.